My definition of homelessness is not the absence of a home, a building. I think the definition of homelessness is the absence of hope. And I think, when we look at one of the common threads that I saw when it came to, working in that population is that there is this teeter ground of losing hope and having hope. And those that had hope were the ones that had, more successful rates with affordable housing or getting a job and doing those different things. Those that lost hope just ended up spiraling into more of a permanent homelessness.
Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman of Still Being Molly, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, the companies, and the small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I get to sit down with an incredible entrepreneur, business leader, community activist, author, speaker, or just an incredible person who is trying to make a positive impact, not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you, the listener, that no matter where you are, no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact. My guest this week is Garrett Underwood. Garrett is currently the executive director of Seed House Project, a live-work home for at-risk youth. His position entails overseeing the daily operations, meeting financial quota, all that kind of stuff. But he is one of those people who is a visionary. In 2016, he decided to dive deeper into the homeless crisis in Los Angeles. He volunteered at all the major organizations within LA, the Dream Center, My Friend's Place, Path, to name a few. And 2 years later, Garrett became the lead coordinator for the homeless outreach for all over the LA County, as well as the program manager at Path. He has taken the lead in finding and creating solutions to the housing crisis in LA. All these years later, he has now housed over 100 people, and he's created hope for each person that walks through his home. He has perfected the art of finding one's purpose with extensive assessment tools and a curriculum for how you can turn your purpose into a program for serving others. Garrett's story is absolutely incredible, so inspirational. I loved having him on the show, and I love talking about some of the real issues that are facing those who are experiencing homelessness today. You are going to absolutely be blessed by this show and this episode. So without further ado, on to my conversation with Garrett Underwood. Garrett, I'm so pumped to have you. Welcome to the show.
Molly, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be on the show.
Just the second I came across you and began to dive into your story and learn more about what you are doing with the Seed House Project, I was like, I need to talk to this guy. So I'm really excited to hear just the backstory and how all of this came to be. So let's do it. Give us the Garrett 101. So who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, long story short, it's been a pretty long journey. I started off with a clothing company, a faith-based clothing company. And so what I did is for every purchase made, I gave a hygiene package to people living on Skid Row and different homeless organizations. And it just kind of expanded. My heart kind of grew a little bit more on trying to figure out the solution because the hygiene package can only go so far. And so I ended up starting an employment program, which is the Save a Penny organization, where they actually make jewelry and kind of share their story within this employment program. And within the first year, we were able to employ about 98 young adults. So it expanded really fast. The biggest problem was there was just a big turnover. A lot of youth were kind of bouncing from shelter to shelter. Phones were turned off. And then that kind of brought me into the phase of actually donating my childhood home to start a housing facility for at-risk youth. And so I just, so that's kind of everything in a nutshell of the long journey.
Now, for those that don't know, you are currently based out of LA. And were you born and raised there?
Yes, I was born in LA, San Fernando Valley.
You know, one of the things that I think is really incredible is you kind of just briefly alluded to it, and I really want you to tell a little bit more of this story, is you donated your home. And I don't know exactly where in the story it fits, but you also lived in a trailer for 6 months with no electricity, no running water. And, so what happened that made you wake up one day and go, yeah, this is a decision I'm going to make right now? And when probably everybody around you is like, well, Garrett, are you okay? Are you warm? Do you have a fever?
Yeah, no, yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, there's a lot of different, experiences. I'm a person that's kind of like very a fixer. So when I see a problem, I want to try to fix it. And, in LA, the homeless epidemic is just growing more and more. And you're seeing a lot of youth that are experiencing homelessness. And so within the employment piece, when I was doing the employment program, I got really connected to one individual. His name was Cameron, and we helped him get like a full-time employment, got him into his own apartment, from the shelter to the apartment. He even got a car. He was really moving up. And so he then, had some substance abuse issues from his background, because he went through foster care and experienced a lot of that. And so he kind of relapsed one day, and then we kind of supported him in that transition. Nothing, major happened, but he did lose his job, and that kind of made him kind of lose his housing. And then at that point, he was staying in his car. And his biggest thing was that he never wanted to be homeless ever again. And so to see himself back into that place really, hit pretty hard for him. And so, long story short, he reached out to me. I thought about bringing him into, my home to stay with me for a little bit. But then I also thought about all of the, responsibility that comes with that. And it kind of scared me. And so in most cases, sometimes we kind of turn a blind eye to certain situations when someone's reaching out. And then within a week later, he relapsed again and passed away in a college junior bathroom. And so that was a huge hit for me. That kind of woke me up and said, okay, it is a lot of responsibility, but with these, young adults that are experiencing homelessness due to foster care, it's, it shouldn't, they don't really have a foundation like I did growing up, so how can I support them in any way possible? So I had roommates at the time, and I told all my roommates, hey, everyone has to move out by the end of the month. I'm going to bring in a lot of young adults that are experiencing homelessness and, work with them. And don't get me wrong, like I've had extensive experience background before even moving into this place. So anybody that's out there that just has this sporadic thought, definitely make sure that you get some type of consulting, because it is a lot to kind of work around. But yeah, that was kind of the trigger that like really set me off to start this program. And yes, family, my parents and everybody was wondering what's wrong with you? Why are you moving into a trailer? And so, I stayed in there for about 6 months, but I definitely got to realize, what these young adults are experiencing there, the feeling of loneliness, embarrassment, I didn't even document any of this footage inside there, but, because I was in a, embarrassed position, coming home from work, and then you're going into a trailer, waking up early, going to take a shower at the gym. It's a lot of time management that I took for granted, such as like your phone, for instance. You got to make sure you charge it when you're out, because I didn't have electricity where I was at. And so, you got to constantly balance all these different things, let alone your own personal life. So it's a lot of weight for anybody going through that.
I am curious, and this is just something I'm naturally a curious person. That's probably why I host a podcast, so I can interview people and ask them questions, because that's just who I am. But I'm curious if there was something in your childhood, like at what point did this issue in particular begin to really be the issue that kept you up at night? And, was this something maybe, your parents instilled in you, or, was it a childhood friend? Where along the way did you begin to feel a pull, a calling towards working with people, especially youth who are experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now that I'm in my latter times of, where I'm at with the whole program, I actually do purpose therapy coaching, and I kind of help people pinpoint where those specific life-changing events happen. I think we all experience these life-changing events, but we don't necessarily focus in on those things that kind of create the long call purpose for your overall goal in life. And so just before we get in, I have this really cool free tools of trying to, be able to dissect what that looks like for you. So it's at freetools.saveapenny.org. And so you can literally, there's a roadmap of how to kind of pull back the onion of what you're here to do and really trying to figure out your purpose. But for me in general, I think just looking back at like the different experiences that I never went down to Skid Row in LA is a huge area where, a lot of people are experiencing homelessness. I never really went down there until I hit, maybe around 20. But I did have a lot of different experiences going to like, homeless shelters and giving out food at a young age. And even just my church background also kind of gave me a little bit more compassion when it came to, others that are, dealing with different troubles and hardships, just learning about Jesus and how he gave his life, So I kind of had those different experiences that built into me. But I think in general, me just wanting to kind of see a certain issue. And then I always loved kids. So when I saw, young adults, going through something, it just really pulled to me more and more and wanted to just be there for them. So when you see those different breadcrumbs of me loving kids, going to church and understanding the whole part of, living a compassionate life and giving back, those are the different things that kind of help me to understand. And I do think that a lot of us that are trying to figure out their purpose. One of the things that we have is like 20 different assessments that you go through to really try to understand yourself. Sometimes we get all these different things that we're supposed to become. Because I actually went to school for kinesiology, and I'm not doing any of that.
I was going to say, a little bit of a different, little different.
Yeah, but it took me some time to peel back the onion and really try to understand who I was in order to gain confidence in the decisions that I make. We have all these different responsibilities of what we should be, how much money we should make, but really trying to find our passion is the biggest thing that we can do while we're on this earth, because we're going to make the biggest impact once we find that.
Now, I know this about kind of, when you were beginning to think and brainstorm this idea, this seed of an idea, see what I did there, for the Seed House project. It came out of a season where you had been, working and volunteering with a lot of organizations that work with different populations of people who are experiencing homelessness. And you began to see some common threads that were essentially different. I don't even know if systems is the right word, but different things that were in place that made it really difficult for people to get out of a season where they are experiencing homelessness. And so it's almost like there were these barriers in place that, whether it was lack of access to a job, affordable housing, substance abuse, all these kinds of things that were kind of keeping them stuck. And you began to notice those things. And so I'd be curious for you to share, what were those things that you began to notice, and how did you begin to work through what it might look like to address those things?
Yeah, I think, my definition of homelessness is not the absence of a home, a building. I think the definition of homelessness is the absence of hope. And I think, when we look at one of the common threads that I saw when it came to, working in that population is that there is this teeter ground of losing hope and having hope. And those that had hope were the ones that had, more successful rates with affordable housing or getting a job and doing those different things. Those that lost hope just ended up spiraling into more of a permanent homelessness. And so once I started to see those different things, I realized that purpose is like a real big piece to finding that hope. If you don't necessarily feel like you have their hope for a purpose, it's really hard to attach yourself to something that you can see yourself doing in the future, or attach yourself to doing something in the future. And so within our program, we totally focus on purpose. We built a whole gutted out the garage and built a whole podcast room, as well as a music studio, photography. We have a entrepreneurship academy program. And so we do all those other wraparound services, such as trying to find the employment and career development and life skills, all those things. But if we don't attach hope, those things are meaningless. You can teach all those different things to them, but if there's nothing to look forward to grow into, especially youth that don't have a foundation that are coming out of foster care, their foundation is that purpose, because for many of us that grow up with parents and family, we have some type of foundation of like, oh, this is where I'm from. I'm actually from Trinidad. So like our family's from Trinidad, you can have this foundation. But someone that's went through foster care that has no idea who their parents are, it just makes it really hard to keep going when nobody else is cheering you on. And so when you develop a purpose and a vision for yourself, whether it's acting or starting a business, now you have customers that are kind of like our followers that are trying to, push you on, encourage you to become the person that you want to be. And so now that we're in 2022, there's so many different outlets to express yourself and use your voice. You don't need to pay for advertisement. You can create a certain way to get advertisement now with all these different platforms. And so we just kind of push that, using social media as an anchor for purpose and giving them the space to really share their voice and really imagine again. I think as we get older, we lose that imagination of what could, and especially for youth, that've been through foster care. They're just being told what they should and shouldn't do. Go to this home, live here for a couple months, and then go here. But they don't really get a chance to imagine the possibilities. They're always in survival mode. And so we're trying to shift that of, you no longer have to survive, let's thrive, so.
Yeah. I know that one of the things that I've kind of learned over the years in some of because I used to work with some organizations that are focused on, our anti-human trafficking organizations. And obviously, the population of women and girls who are experiencing homelessness, whether that's, they're teen girls who are runaways, who, are often trafficked within the first 48 hours of becoming homeless. One of the things that when they were kind of getting out of that and coming out of those seasons, the thing that was really difficult, it was almost like we had to talk about how to rewire like their neural pathways of thinking, in a visionary sense, like thinking forward, thinking long term, because when you get into that pattern of just survival mode and thinking about where your next meal is going to come from, where you're going to sleep that night, or what, whatever it is the next thing, that switching the gears in your brain to think, oh, I actually, I can start dreaming and I can start having a vision for my life, and I can, and I don't have to have this mindset of where's my next meal going to come from. That's so difficult. That's such a difficult, just train of thought to break, because when there's like countless studies that have been done on when you have a repetitive way of thinking, whether it's positive or negative, you're actually creating neural pathways within your brain that tell you, oh, well, this is true. And so you begin to, even if it's a lie, you begin to believe that lie. Like there's so many studies that have been done too on like murderers who are convinced that they're innocent, and they just keep telling themselves the same lie over and over again. Everybody's like, we caught you on camera. And he's like, but I didn't do it. You know what I mean? I realize it's a really extreme example, but it's true, whether that, and then, you go all the way down to, youth or teens who are experiencing, issues with self-esteem. And if they're standing there and they're looking in the mirror every single day, saying these negative things about themselves, they begin to believe those things. They begin to believe that those things are actually true when they are not. And so but in order to rewire those neural pathways, it takes work. Yeah. And so I'm curious, what are some of the things that you have seen have really begun to make a difference when you're trying to essentially rewire someone's brain to for them to know they have purpose, they have talent and skill, and they're brilliant and they're beautiful and they're capable, all these kinds of things that where the rest of society or the rest of their life, or especially if they've been maybe in the foster care system, they've been told over and over and over again that they don't matter, that their lives mean nothing. How do you begin to rewire those neural pathways?
Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of noticed those different things, because it is really, it is a long process. This doesn't happen overnight of, them figuring it out. But one of the tactical tools, not only do we have a bunch of different workshops that happen throughout the month for them to, start practicing voicing themselves, but we also do powerful experiences. And so when we think about our own self of like making different shifts, for the first time you rode a horse, or maybe the first time you traveled outside the country, those things were powerful experiences that kind of shifted the way you looked looked at your world. You realize, okay, my world is so much bigger. There's a whole other country out there. Or this is different, riding a horse, whatever that looks like. So we try to capitalize on creating those powerful experiences where they haven't really experienced something before, and they're able to see themselves doing it because they actually did it. And then we also bring in a lot of different speakers that have the same background as them to create that relatability for them to understand that if they can do it, then you can do it as well. So it's really trying to help them be able to see, but also creating a community of, believers, bringing the community that have already got to where they wanted to be and they have the same experience, and bringing them in to kind of mentor them, to walk them through those steps. Because I think the biggest thing is, especially for youth, if you've never been in their situation, they can disregard you for, because they feel that they don't, that person might not know, how they feel. And so our biggest thing is, let's bring people that have been in that situation and that is successful, so that they can actually see themselves in those places as well. So it is a long, process. Most of the cases, it takes about 2 years for that rewiring to happen. But even at 2 years, they're still dealing with those triggers from the past. And so it's just, it's like dropping the seed. That's why we're called Seed House Project. Just a little seed for them to kind of start watering as they, grow into the adults that they want to become.
I'm going to take a quick break from my chat with Garrett to thank our partner of the show, and that's Mama Suds. After a long, cozy winter inside, it is spring, and so it's time to bust open the windows, grab your Mama Suds germ cleaner, and get to cleaning. From the windows to the walls, to floors, upholstery, carpets, you name it, Mama Suds has a truly safe and effective product to help you clean it. I have personally used Mama Suds in our home for years. I love their all-purpose cleaner, their Castile soap, the toilet bombs. They are incredible. So head on over to mamasuds.com and use the coupon code MOLLY for 15% off your order. Now back to my conversation with Garrett Underwood. There are obviously a lot of myths and misconceptions about populations of people who are experiencing homelessness. And sometimes those myths, those misconceptions, maybe those stereotypes, things like that, are difficult to break. For somebody listening who maybe has some of those things, what are the things that you kind of see people maybe think about people who are experiencing homelessness, and what is actually true?
Yeah. Well, not every homeless person is like an addict. I think that's a big thing. And then also just understanding the backstory on a lot of people that are experiencing homelessness. At one point, they may not have been homeless, or what are some of those experiences that they had to kind of lead them there. And so some statistics in LA, 30% of the homeless population come from foster care background. And then, the jail system, 70% of people exiting the jail system has also came from the foster care background. And, most people that do exit out of the jail system, because of whatever they have on record, it's really hard for them to get jobs. So these are different things that prevent, like different barriers that prevent actual permanent housing. So with those numbers, you can see that, yes, they may have did something to get into to jail, but also understanding that, most of them grew up without that foundation. And the foster care system is a little, at least for LA, it's a little, needs to be redefined or recreated, because it's still when it first was put together. And so that's a whole other barrier that people may not understand is, once you exit out the foster care system, you either have, family, or you might go into a shelter. And I know at 18 or even 21, I wasn't even ready to actually pay, for the cost of LA rent out here, and so, or even think about my credit, never really thought about building my credit and different things like that. And so if you don't have the guidance and that foundation going through, the foster care system and aging out, it's a real traumatic, event that happens. And so those are some myths that I guess not, everyone is an addict, and,
Right.
and even those that are going through addiction, you have to consider the whole story, not just
Right.
today when you see them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned and you talked about the cost of living there, which, I mean, I think about when I was graduating college, I had for a while considered moving to either New York or LA, and because I wanted to pursue comedy. And I think back to that time, and I never could move there because I couldn't afford it. I'm like, I was, and I was like searching for jobs everywhere. And I know that the job economy is different now, but even then, I mean, it was just insane. And I was like looking at these, studio apartments that are like 500 square feet and, one bed and a bath and maybe like a little kitchenette. And it was like $2,500 a month. And I was like, what is happening? Like, who can afford to live in these places? Like, this is just absolutely insane. And then one of the things that I think is so interesting, and I'm just fascinated by this stuff in general, is like how the last couple of years, how the pandemic has affected those things. And like I read an article a couple of weeks ago that currently the state of California, just in general, is out of U-Hauls. There are no U-Hauls because everybody is moving out because it's no longer sustainable to live there. And so with all these people who can now like get a remote job, and I realize this is like a whole, almost like a different topic, but it's just fascinating to me because, you have these people that can work remotely. And so they're moving to a place where they're still earning their like LA income, but they're moving somewhere else where that income isn't like giving them a, $500 or 500 square foot studio apartment. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's fascinating. And so I think about like, how is that sustainable for average middle class person, let alone somebody who has a barrier like coming from the foster care system or just, getting out of prison or something like that. Like the added level of difficulty to earn a living wage and live, without feeling like you're living paycheck to paycheck. And not to mention that at the time we're, recording this, like gas is more than the minimum wage per gallon. Like, I mean, how do you expect people to survive? It's bonkers to me.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. That's a whole other piece that I hope, things kind of shift and changing those things. But you're right. I mean, it's kind of on the impossible side of things. And, we got a big task over at Seed House.
Yeah. So for those that, and I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but, on the day to day, what does Seed House do? How can people support the work that you're doing? And what is sort of on the horizon for Seed House in the future?
Yeah. So specifically what we do is we don't call ourselves a transitional home or even a shelter or anything like that. We call ourselves a live work space for at-risk youth. So the goal to that is, not necessarily putting labels on people as, in a shelter or whatever that looks like. It just because it creates a handicap, mindset. But what that looks like is we do offer, all the wraparound services such as credit building, life skills. We also offer instant employment. So once they come into our program, they get 300 hours of employment. And then we also focus really on the creative arts and, expanding on, just sharing their voice while being in the program. Some of the things that we're looking to do in the future is to possibly, open up another home for women. And then we also want to have like an international exchange. So we're looking at, possibly getting another home in another country so that we can have that powerful experience of giving back in another country while living there for a couple months. So that's something that, we do. And I also mentioned that I do help others kind of navigate and find their purpose and expand on creating more nonprofits like ours. So I do have like a coaching program that is, 90-day course where it basically, you can transition your story into a nonprofit, and we help with just building out the whole operations and executing. And even just if you don't even know what your purpose is, we even kind of go into depth of what that looks like for you. But like I said, I have free tools at saveapenny.org. You can also find our employment program on there where they actually make necklaces, share their story on that same website, which is saveapenny.org. So I'm sure it's probably going to be in the link of this podcast.
Yes,
so,
I will make sure I will have all that in the show notes. You've alluded to it a couple of times, and I'd love for you to just kind of give us the overview of what this looks like, because I know one of the things that you are very passionate about is helping people, like kind of teaching people what you call this 5-step roadmap for turning your story into a mission. And how do you go about doing that? And, whether, you're listening and you just think like, I've had a boring life, like I don't have you have a story. Everybody has a story, and it doesn't matter where you grew up, whether you grew up, in the wealthiest neighborhood, or if you grew up, on Skid Row or somewhere in between, you have a story, and you can use that story, for good, for purpose, for a mission. Talk about that process that you walk people through.
Yeah, so the 5-step roadmap is just a quick snap view of the actual 90-day course. So we give some pretty good tools in there. And much like you said, a lot of people that I run into is like, I don't really have a story, but everyone has a story. Yeah. And my biggest thing that I say is, you're an expert of your own life. Nobody has ever experienced your life. And so you're an expert in that.
Yeah.
And so what that looks like is they go through a series of assessments to really understand their core values, their worldviews. How do you look at the world? And we even kind of map out your flow chart and what makes you work at your maximum peak. And we even talk about your human design and are you a manifestor or projector? So we go into a lot of different pieces to kind of understand you as a person. And then we go into a timeline piece where we talk about different events that happen in your life that really shifted the character, personality that you are. And we go really into detail into that. And once we kind of pinpoint some of the major things that you've experienced and some of your strengths and weaknesses, then we kind of go into organizations that are similar to maybe a cause that you may be interested in getting involved in. And we analyze those things and help them figure out what's the gaps within those pieces. And once we figure out the gap, we help kind of create a whole operation around it. And then we even do a funding map for you. So the biggest thing is, how do I fund this piece? How do I get the money for this? We help you develop what that looks like to bring in the income that you need to do that. So that's kind of overall what the roadmap looks like. But the actual 90-day coaching is so much more in depth. We help you develop your website and logo, all those different things, and even just the legalistic side of all of it as well.
I think it's such an incredible resource because I have heard from, if I had a nickel for every time, somebody's like, I don't know my purposes. I don't know how to figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing, or what I want to do something that really, matters, that means more, that, is, people. And obviously, like, I know that you're a Christian, I'm a Christian too. And so like, that's something that I often just am like, well, that's God placed that in your heart for a reason. Like he created us to desire to live for something bigger than ourselves, AKA living for what he's called us to do. And, even people who don't, have a faith perspective, still have that God-given, desire within their hearts in order to do that. But it can feel daunting. It can feel scary. And for you to create a resource where you kind of demystify and be like, it's not actually, it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't have to be that difficult. So I think it's really powerful. So again, for the listeners, I'm going to have that information in the show notes of where you can check that out. And, so if this is maybe something that you're really feeling a pull towards, you're feeling like, you know what, I think that it's time that I do something different, or I've felt this kind of tug, to something different. This is definitely the resource for you. So Garrett, this has been fantastic. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. I think it's absolutely incredible. So thank you for being here. But before we go, it's time for the get to know you round. So Garrett, are you ready?
I'm excited. Yeah.
All right. Question number 1 is, I know that you're a very busy guy, but right now, what is your current guilty pleasure that you do just for you?
Guilty pleasure. I don't know if it's guilty, but I really love painting. I'm an artist at heart. So
I love that.
I do a lot of sculpture work and whatnot. So that's so you do painting and sculpture. What do you, I know nothing about art. I can draw like stick figures with hair. So like what's your medium of choice? Is that the like fancy art question that I should ask? It's probably, I just do whatever comes out on me, but I would say it's probably more mixed media. So it's a bit of like sculpture with painting. And so, it's what I like to do. I don't necessarily sell any of them. I just paint.
You just do it just for
most
you.
Most people probably don't even know that I do this.
I love that. I love to think that there's somebody listening who knows you pretty well and is like, what? Garrett? Why did you tell me that? No, that's great. I think that's amazing. All right. What makes you laugh the hardest?
Wow. What makes me laugh the hardest? I think my niece. She's hilarious.
How old is she?
She's 2.
Oh yeah.
But she got a lot of personality when she knows what she wants, or it just comes out very bluntly.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Kids are hilarious. Kids are hilarious. Yeah. I'm telling you, if you ever want to be humble, just go hang around a kid, because they're just like they ain't gonna filter themselves around you.
No holding back at all.
I love it. Okay. What is on your current most played playlist on, like Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen?
Some people may, disagree, but I like a little Kanye West,
Hey.
So I think that's some of the stuff I listen to.
You can like his music and still think that he's a crazy person. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Don't send me an email, people. Don't send me an email.
But yeah, Jesus is King is a really cool album.
It is.
It is.
So it is just a shame.
I enjoy it.
That's also sometimes. Well, okay. So full disclosure. I think it was, what year was it? Oh, was it like 2008? Maybe. I want to say it was summer 2008. I went and I saw Kanye in concert. But now, so this was 2008, and I want to say it was like Kanye West, NERD. So for those that don't know, Pharrell Williams, he was the lead singer of NERD. They were a group in the mid-aughts, the mid something. And then who was the other one? I can't remember. There was a third act, but I have to say, like, Kanye put on a concert. Like, that was, I wasn't at the time. I was like, oh yeah, Kanye's fine. Cause this is like 2008. And I just was like, it's fine. His music's fine. And then I saw him in concert and I was like, okay, that is pretty awesome. So
yeah, the guy is talented for sure.
There's a reason that he makes the big bucks. So yeah, no judgment here. Okay. And then my last question is the question I ask all my guests. And that is, what does it mean to you to run a business with purpose?
I think it's really just a lifestyle. I think business is a form of being able to survive, but it's even it gets to a point where even if you weren't getting paid for what you did, like you'd still do it. It's just a natural thing for me. So I think, it's more purpose for me rather than business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Garrett, this has been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Molly. Appreciate you.
I told you Garrett was awesome. My gosh, what an incredible conversation. Loved our time together. Be sure to tune in next week where I have my guest, Emmy Award-winning journalist Liz Brunner on the show. She is incredible. We had such a great show. I even had the awesome privilege of being on her podcast a few weeks ago. You're going to love it, and do not miss it next week. As always, I would love to know what you loved about this episode, or if there was something that you learned. Let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Use the show hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast. Now, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Thank you for your support week in and week out. Be sure to visit the archives for past shows featuring incredible entrepreneurs and business owners who are literally changing the world with what they do for a living. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen, and click the subscribe or follow button to help make sure that you never miss a new episode of the show. And while you're there, would you take a moment to leave a review? Leaving a review helps me to know what you're liking and how this show is personally impacting you. This show is produced by the incredible team at Third Wheel Media. Now, thank you so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.